guys, this is a great crowd. In case you don't know who I am, I'm your MC and host today. I'm Guy Edwards. I'm missing from 95 of the 96 episodes of Fighting Bigfoot. Okay, so I'm really excited. David Ellis is definitely not only a great collector and a great analyst for the audio, but he really helped us kind of develop a discipline for collecting evidence in general. So someone I really look up to. He's an investigator with the Olympic Project who specializes in track casting and audio and video analysis. And he's definitely the go-to guy when you have new audio stuff. Are you going to provide contact information at some point?
OlympicProject.com.
Okay, go to the OlympicProject.com to send audio. And David Ellis' guy. He was actually introduced to Bigfoot through a story his grandfather told him when he was 8 years old. 3 years later, at the age of 11, he had his own encounter. After thrashing sounds came from a nearby forest, he heard a 10-second vocalization. It sounded somewhere between a cross of a lion roar and an elephant trumpet. So if you guys can put your hands together and give a big round of applause for David Ellis.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you very much. As advertised, yes, I am David Ellis of the Olympic Project. First, I'd really like to thank all the effort that Amy Halleck went through to put this together. It's a fantastic opportunity, and she's done a tremendous job. So let's give her a round of applause. So today I want to talk a little bit about audio and the analysis part of it, because once you collect your audio, once you collect your audio, you need to be able to analyze it to try to discern what it is that you may have recorded. So just a little bit of personal history. I'm born and raised here in Washington. I grew up in Vancouver and I graduated from the University of Washington. I'm married, have a family, and I live on Whidbey Island. Been doing field investigative work for about 11 years. And so, as Guy alluded to, when I was very young, my grandfather had an 80-acre farm in Battleground, Washington. So not very far from here. So if you're local, you probably know where Battleground is. So this is a Google Earth shot of that particular location. And as the story goes, he was out cutting hay one summer afternoon when wait a minute, I got to do circles and arrows for everybody. Went up, jumped a 5-foot tall monkey, as he described it, and it ran across the hayfield, jumped the fence and into the woods. So as a young kid, you got to ask questions, right? So where did the monkey come from, Grandpa? I don't know, must have escaped from a circus. Well, what circus was in town when that happened? I don't know. You know, and you eventually get to the, just be still. Asking enough questions. So at a very young age, I had some sort of idea that there are monkeys in the woods.
Okay.
So in 1963, when the Beatles were starting to make their mark, I was growing large pumpkins. And also having an experience that I later come to find out was probably a Bigfoot experience. This is a shot of the field that I had my experience in dating back to 1960. This outline right here is the field that we called the stump field. And it's not real evident from that picture, but there's tall stumps. They're maybe 12 to 15 feet tall. When it was logged, it was the old buck and board method, and they sawed the trees off at about 12 to 15 feet high. So we had all these, I'm not sure, can we boost that at all?
Do a quick test.
Test. Better?
That's better.
Okay, now we're going to move up in the back.
Much as you can get, be better.
It's up all the way, so just take a big buzz now.
I'm going to swallow this thing if I
Just need to be short like
if I'm
me.
any closer. So we went to this field on a Saturday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, and there's a little draw going from here to that line right there. And we were maybe within 10 to 15 feet of the fence line when all of a sudden the trees that are alders were starting to sway. And I couldn't figure out why they were swaying. It wasn't wind, and it was just a couple of trees. And then I noticed that the limbs were being broken off. And now I'm really scared. I don't know what the hell's going on. Excuse me. I didn't know what the heck was going on. And then it cut loose with a scream. We're going to lose our audio, aren't we? I'm not sure what's going on.
Move the laptop this way so it's not touching the speaker or the microphone. If you can. Okay.
I think we're there.
Okay.
So it's about a 10 to 12 second scream that I later described to my parents as something that sounded like the roar of a lion and the trumpet of an elephant all at the same time. So it was something that I had never heard before, but it sounded like those two animals at the same time. So it was it wasn't a bear or a cougar or anything like that because of the volume of the sound. It was huge. So next week we had a library class, and in that library class I related my experience, and the librarian came up to me afterwards and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I want to pull you aside and talk to you." And she started grilling me about my experience, and then said, "I have a book for you to read. It's an adult book. It just got published a few years ago. And this was the book, Abominable Snowman, Legend Come to Life by Ivan Sanderson." And in it, he describes the Bigfoot experiences that have been happening as of late in the late 50s. So without knowing how she knew, I thought it was interesting that she pointed me in this direction. So fast forward, I'm doing internet searches, and I come across a Bigfoot conference in Bellingham in 2005, and I decided that I have to go to this and listen to what's going on. And I got to meet quite a few people that were out and about and looking for this creature, and finally I decided, you know what, I got to get out there. So in 2006, that's when I really started to do my investigative work. So I would go out and I would interview witnesses, and I decided that, you know, it's time to start documenting this, what's happening, because everybody has a story, but not necessarily the background information or the ability to vet the evidence. So I started doing field recording and working with the Olympic Project. So what I use is just a digital recorder, And I've refined my experience over the years to where I know that what you want to do is you want to turn the recorder on and leave it running. Some of my best audio is still out in the woods because I didn't have my recorder running at the time the vocalization happened. So I went through quite a bit of equipment. I've looked into bionic dishes and ways of obscuring the dish, and I've had pretty good luck. But recently I've gone to another method where I just utilize the microphones on the digital recorder. So my advice, if you were going to get into this, is get yourself a good studio quality digital recording device. And because it records in 360, the dish is great because it will pick up distances in further away from you, but you have to have your dish pointed in the right direction to get the clearest sound. So that's not always, the dish isn't always going to be pointed in the right direction. So I decided that I really needed omnidirectional microphones. I've also have increased my software capability of being able to clean up very weak signals and enhance them. That's because I use a spectrographic analysis tool that we'll get into here shortly. And once you can identify where the sound resides, then you know what you want to amplify and what you want to discard. So I have the ability to clean up audio and also enhance the sound that you want to hear. So recording trial and error, I found that experience is learning to recognize a mistake when you've done it again. So there's lots of trial and error. You just keep plugging away till you get it to work for you. I found that there's no substitute for the quality of equipment that you use. You really need to learn the limits and functions of your audio equipment. I've learned that the hard way that standby is different than recording. So I've recorded all night long a couple of times supposedly and come out to find that my recorder was blinking, meaning it was still in standby. So you really do need to pay attention to what you're doing. Okay. So do not hold your recording device. If you hold your recording device, you will pick up all kinds of rustling sounds. You want to get away from your clothing. Often I will find a place to just park it and move around. You want to distance yourself from your talkative friends. That includes people that will whisper to, because often they'll recognize your recording, but still it'll be a distraction when you review your audio. So that's why I say consider remote recording from where you are going to be standing, because you just can't get people to stop from communicating. And especially if they hear something, there's usually a good reaction that could step on the next vocalization. So the next process is learn how to edit files and avoid the overuse of noise reduction filters. They can actually make your recording worse by trying to eliminate a specific sound. They can end up sounding like they're underwater, and sometimes if you hear somebody's edited recording, it will sound like it was filmed in outer space or recorded in outer space, which detracts from the actual sound you want to hear. So also do not edit original material. Always edit a copy. And then lastly, learn how to analyze your audio visually. I understand that you're wondering, what do you mean visually? We'll get into that. So are recordings really subject to scientific scrutiny? Here's something interesting. We all see, smell, hear, taste, and feel the world differently. And unless you've trained yourself to think otherwise, it is common to assume that everyone sees and experiences the world the same way that you do. So, to that end, we all hear differently. In other words, some people are tone deaf, some people have perfect pitch. So, we have a conundrum. Confusing, difficult problem or question. So how do we analyze it? So, okay, so you go from what was that to hey, I think that's the real thing. That's the real thing, guys. That's the real thing, guys. So, you know, you really can't make statements like that. That was me making that statement in my early years because we don't really know if that was a Sasquatch, but it sure sounded like something that could be perceived as a Sasquatch. So you're going to have to come up with a little bit more than just what you hear. And part of my journey crossed paths with a gentleman that goes by the handle of Monongahela, and he said, what you really need to start doing is analyzing your sounds visually. Visually. Yes, visually. And he described what a spectrogram was to me. And it's really an image that shows spectral density of a signal that varies with time. It's more like a voice print where it gives you much more detailed information than a waveform, which is typically the spikes that you see. So here's a spectrogram, and if you look at the long red streak, that is a vocalization, and if you look at that vertical signal there, that's a knock of some sort, and then there's another knock. So this is looped. You'll hear this 3 times. So if you look at the graph on the left, over here, there's numbers. And what that relates to is where the sound resides in hertz. It's a unit of measurement. The second sound is a knock, as you see, and it has a completely different look than the screen nature of that horizontal sound. So now I know that the sounds of interest that I want to find kind of reside in this area right here, in the 600 hertz to 750 hertz. That's kind of the area, the sweet spot that I'm looking for. So is science using this tool? Yes, they are. It's called Bioacoustics. It's a branch of science that's concerned with the production of sound that's affecting living organisms, especially as it relates to communication. Bioacoustics is a branch of zoology, investigates sound production and reception in animals, including man, and how animals communicate by sound. spectrograms is the main tool that they use. Here's a study that was done of vocalization of farm animals. And they used spectrographic analysis to determine the specific sounds of the animals that they were interested in on the farm. So the future of bioacoustic research should focus on the comprehensive study of a broad spectrum of species and their specific vocalizations. Here's a study that was done on the long-range vocalization of wild chimpanzees. The sound analyzed spectrographically. There was 129 tapes of the pant-hooting vocalization of 7 chimpanzees. And what they found is each animal had a distinctive difference and was able to quantify, and which suggested that the chimpanzees were probably able to differentiate their partners. So what can we learn from analyzing our audio using spectrographic analysis tools? A deeper understanding and a more detailed interest in the sound. Hey! Thanks, Tech Department. Back to our show. We can gain a deeper understanding and more detailed interest. It's easier to compare a suspicious sound to a known sound. In other words, if you record a coyote, which I have done using the Macaulay Library of Sound as a resource, you can pull a coyote vocalization off of that, record it, and then compare it to your recording visually to see if they reside in the same area. So, does the signature reveal significant differences to known sounds? It gives us the ability to gain more analytical consensus. It's a better and more sophisticated way to review audio recordings, creating a collections of sounds of interest to be compared with recordings from other investigators. So, I'm starting to do that, and I'm starting to actually go back and review sounds that I have collected from different locations, and we'll go back and see where some of those comparisons from one area to the next where we have identical sounds that are suspicious. So quite often I get audio sent to me, and on the left is a spectrogram of a file that was sent to me, and they said that we had just witnessed a Bigfoot in the area, and we think that this could be its vocalization. So I listened to it and I went, I think that's an owl, so I went to the Macaulay Library of Sound, and you can see over here, this is their recording of a barred owl. So let's have a listen. And now let's listen to this one. Okay, so it was very similar. Now, if you look at the actual dynamic of the sound print, you can see that it has very similar characteristics. What's different from each of these sounds is that this was recorded in the field, this one over here, and this one was recorded probably in the comfort of a zoo. That's why it's very quiet. So here's some more vocalizations, and I'm going to take just a quick time out here because I just realized that I needed to increase the volume here. I have a volume defeat.
Cross everyone, Mom. Be careful.
There we go. Okay, so here's a, thank you very much for that, little bearing with me on that pause. Here's a variety of owl vocalizations, just so you know that they can have a wide variety of sounds. Bunch of monkeys in the woods. Okay, so.
Is it true Bigfoot can sometimes mimic owls?
You know, that's a very good question. We do have evidence of mimic. Whether they actually mimic an owl, I'm not sure the signal is going to look that close. It's possible from my standpoint because I've had them recorded mimicking other things other than owls. In this specific scenario that we're looking at here, I asked a voice recording specialist. He has a professional voice, and I asked him to recreate a vocalization that John Andrews of the Olympic Project had recorded back in the early 2000s. I consider it maybe the gold standard of vocalizations that should be compared. And he graciously accepted the challenge to see if he could mimic it. And I think that he pretty much nailed it as far as what I'm seeing here. But can anybody see some differences right off the bat? Anybody want to volunteer what they see that's different?
Not within the box.
I'm sorry?
It's not within the box. It's either higher or lower.
Okay, I understand now, yes. Up here, this is called upper harmonics, and that's what you noticed, that there's no upper harmonics in this suspicious. Also missing is this. This is a lower harmonic. This right here is the main fundamental. This is where the bulk of the sound resides. So Bill nailed it as far as hitting the sounds. But you can tell that this is different. This subject is different than this subject. So that's the main point of emphasis. So I'll play you his attempt to mimic, and then the actual sound. So what I'm showing is that by analyzing it visually, you gain different information than if you just listened to it and said, oh, yeah, that's that. Well, if you record a human in the field trying to vocalize like a suspicious sound or a Sasquatch, I'm here to tell you that you should be able to pick out the human versus the suspicious sound. Here's another human making a long vocalization. This is Scott Taylor. And look at all of the upper harmonics, which we don't get in the suspicious category. Okay, so Stan Courtney is another person in the world of Bigfootery that likes to do analysis of sound. And he was on an expedition with us in an area that we call Rattlesnake. And his group went one direction, our group went another. And this is a recording of his vocalization. And then in the next slide, I'll show you the response that we were able to record. So he's about a half a mile away. And then this is the response we got. I had a study area that I was going to in Grace Harbor in 2007. I recorded a vocalization that I thought was fairly interesting. It seemed to be saying something in its shout, and I come up with, now this is just like pareidolia. When you see something, you have in your visual that your mind will try to make it to be something. So the same thing happens with sound. Your mind is going to struggle to make it sound like what you want it or what you think it is, but it might not be the same for somebody else. So when I say that I think it's saying something like, whoa, hubbub, that's what I hear. You may hear something completely different, and that's okay, because what we're mostly concerned with are what's the information that we get in those little boxes right there. If you, I made an outline of this because it's very difficult to see on a large screen with this many people, but if you look at those boxes, it's indicating where the sound resides. And these two vocalizations that I'm going to play for you are really saying the same thing. One was recorded in 2007, the other was recorded in 2013. They're separated by about 35 driving miles, 26 air miles in a straight line. So in other words, they were recorded in pretty much the same neighborhood, but the information that I'm gathering here is that this, the information that I'm gathering is that this is a lower sound in hertz, this is a higher sound in hertz. Well, this was recorded first, so if this was a young one, this would be reversed, where this subject should be recorded first, and if it grew up and its voice dropped into a lower octave. But that's not the case. The lower octave was recorded first and the higher octave was recorded second. So let's have a listen. So if you didn't figure it out already, I apologize. I should have told you that that's a single sound looped 5 times. So I'm repeating the sound over and over. So it takes a little while for your mind to focus in on what exactly it is that you're hearing. So I'll play it again for you. Okay, so just recently I was on the internet and I was searching for stories about Daniel Boone, who supposedly shot and killed a Yahoo. How many here have heard that term before? Not just the internet search provider, but the term in respects to it could be possibly a Bigfoot. Well, I guess back in the Appalachian region, stories of Yahoos existed, and I thought it was kind of interesting because one of the sounds that I had been recording had kind of a wahoo nature to it. And so when I pulled up the internet search for stories about Daniel Boone, up popped a video on YouTube that was called The Wahoo Shout, commonly called the baboon bark. Interesting. So I checked it out. And here's a video. I'll play it twice. Listen to the response to the wahoo bark by the baboon. They're getting answers, but listen to the answers. They're more like barks, like a dog bark. Come on. Next one. So here's something that I've recorded here in Washington that I thought it sounds very similar. And here's, I'm going to loop these two together, the baboon bark and the wahoo that I just played. Okay, I'm going to explain a few things here visually for you. What you're looking at is what you just heard, the comparison of the baboon to an unknown sound that I recorded here in Washington. And if you look at the two, you'll say, well, they don't look alike at all. But if you look closer, if you look over here to the far right, I've identified where the main fundamental resides. It's this dark line up here, this short box, and then this downward stroke here. Well, that compared to what I recorded here in Washington, this is the main fundamental here. You can see that they reside in different hertz categories, but the visual of what is actually being vocalized is very much the same. So I'll play it again for you now that you have a visual tool. Okay, so audio recordings can be analyzed in more depth, yielding more information using a spectrographic analysis tool. If you want to get into recording, learn recording techniques that suit your needs. In other words, trial and error. And audio recording is documenting. If you record something that you would like me to personally analyze, you can send a clip of a recording to me at olympicproject.com and I will respond. I'm going to leave you here with a bunch of audio recordings that I have made over the years of suspicious sounds. You'll hear wood knocks, you will hear drumming, you will hear vocalizations of all different types. I'm not going to play a visual tool with this. This is just something to listen to. All right, so I guess at this point,
20 minutes for questions.
okay. I'm gonna check something out here because that was way too quiet for what I played originally. Sorry if somehow it's defaulted again. I apologize. It is louder, so I'm not quite sure why it wasn't loud enough to hear, but I do apologize for that. So, we have time for questions.
Yeah, what sound analysis software can you recommend?
Well, what I use is Sonic Visualizer that creates that spectrograph. For me personally, that's what I have learned. There's others out there that do just as good a job, but it's freeware, so you can pick it up off the internet and it doesn't cost you anything. Yes?
Yes, how did you get involved with the Secure, that Russian company?
How did I get involved with it? It was something that software that I had purchased with my computer back in 2013. Yes?
I was wondering about third owl, when you have a whole bunch of owls.
Yes.
The one in the approximately the middle, when you heard that, did you rethink your elephant lion thing from childhood?
No. That particular, if you saw the signature, it went up. The vocalization that I heard was similar to that you saw, the long vocalization that we compared it to Bill Lee. That's what I heard. Yes?
Vocalizations that you have that are unknown, have you ever had humans try to mimic that to see if they get in that same special range?
That's what that was one of the slides that I showed you where we compared, yeah, and there is a difference. We have a much broader range in our vocalization that is visually seen, whereas the suspicious sounds that I'm recording don't seem to have that upper harmonic. Yes?
Do you have a particular recording device, digital recording device that you recommend for people who are novices in that area?
I have a personal, my personal is the Roland series, and the current edition is the RO5. And the reason that I use that is it has the ability to roll into a new file as it's recording. So when I turn the recorder on and I go to pick it up, the next day I won't have one large file, I'll have 25 files. And they're broken down into about 30-minute segments. So, yes?
Couple of things. So 600 to 700 hertz, is that your favorite sweet spot? So, okay. And then just wildlife acoustics, you can look them up on the internet. Cornell University actually recommended them to me about 3 or 4 years ago. They make field recorders and all this. And they also have some analytical software too, but it's sort of expensive.
Yeah, it's actually the Macaulay Library of Sound.
Oh,
That's
Cornell?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they sponsor it, that library. And they're getting better. Just about anything that you want to plop into their search will yield something as a result. That's why I always tell people, start there.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a disinterested third party that documents. You'll have a file name, a number, and who recorded it, when they recorded it, all the pertinent information, and it's excellent. So what I do is I record that file on my digital recorder, convert it into an MP3 file that I then analyze against something that I think is suspicious.
Okay.
Have you utilized sound blasting, and if so, have you had good or bad results?
Well, that's the answer to that question is yes, people do get results, and that's
you yourself.
myself. I don't. What I do is I knock. I have a technique that I developed when I was really little. unrelated to this, but I found out that you can make a popping sound by jetting air into your mouth. That's what I do. And that simulates what I think is a knock, and I've gotten knock responses back to that, to the point where I'm going back and forth with something, and then something over here starts going back and forth with me. So I don't like to vocalize personally. Others do. And the reason is, I don't know what the heck I'm saying. I don't know if I just started a fight or somebody wants to come kiss me. I don't know. So I don't personally do that. I know that you'll see quite a few folks do that in the field. They feel comfortable with it, and God bless them. So it's a subjective thing. I'm not going to tell you don't do that. If you feel comfortable vocalizing in hopes of getting a response, go for it. Yes, sir.
Do you find that the spectrographic data remains true over distance? Like the further out the recording, the less information you actually get from said recording?
Yes. In other words, yes, your signal is weaker, and sometimes those upper harmonics aren't nearly as visible. But I've had vocalizations that are very close and still don't yield that particular information. So that's why I'm kind of zeroing in on that. But that's a very good question, and that's absolutely true. The further away your vocalization is, the less likely you're going to yield upper harmonics.
Speaking of upper harmonics, is there any research or data on a function of size of the creature or animal that created the vocalization? So we know elephants, infrasound, and they do not reach into a certain range. So if we got a recording that lacked those upper harmonics, like I had shown with the baboon, we can perforce say, this is not going to be a smaller primate, maybe this is something that's got to be like X size, and like extrapolate from that.
So the question is, do I think that that's out there?
It's big, so it's lower.
I think so,
Okay.
but personally I don't have that
Okay. Do you know if there is any research into that?
I'm certain that there is. I just have not run across it, but this is a very wide field.
Yeah.
If you do information search on bioacoustics, you'll find quite a few studies.
All right.
Yes?
Okay, name us the squatchiest place to get some voices.
Any place that seems to have water, that has a good food source. The lowlands around the Olympic Peninsula, drive around. As Derek said, that our research has shown us you're more likely to have an interaction or a sighting in your car than you are walking around in the woods. I don't know if that's a function of more people are driving than walking around in the woods. I suspect so, but
So in the Olympic Peninsula, you wouldn't say go camp right in the middle of the peninsula, but maybe outside, just around the edges?
right around any kind of a creek or estuary or swamp or places where animals could congregate that they might want to pick one off here and there. But the key, from what I have observed, seems to be related to water sources. Yes, sir.
Couple of questions. One, how much data storage you on those 25 files or large file? How much data storage is used for? Is that like gig?
Yes, you're going to have to purchase separate hardware to store these files.
So if I'm recording 24 hours and I use a digital recorder out in the field, how much space is being used off of that?
About 2 gig.
Okay. And then in regards to your recordings of baboon versus the other recording of wahoo, you mentioned that both were in different hertz levels.
Yes.
So is it possible that these creatures have a discerning enough ear to determine vocalizations between humans and other animals?
I suspect so, but that's a subjective answer. I'll have to qualify that.
So if you were to use something as a baboon call out in the field,
It would, in my opinion, it would be noted that this is different. That's, again, I have no basis in fact. That's just kind of, sometimes you'll get a response to a call blast, sometimes you won't. I don't know if it's a function of them not being there or them going, can't fool me.
yeah. So the third question, in watching a lot of military programs, the military now has devices that hear bullets and directional locations. Do you anticipate using similar technology to determine distance and location of a call?
A lot of interpretive things can be found in that spectrogram. The brighter the color, the louder it is, which may suggest it being closer, and faint sounds are not as bright. So there is a distance factor in your recording. How much distance? Maybe somebody could be able to determine that by how bright the signal is. I personally don't have that knowledge yet, but it's possible. One more question? Yes, sir?
Are you in the infrasound at all? Are you working with it with understanding that's below human hearing?
Well, here's this situation with infrasound. Your recording device will only go to about 40 hertz. And infrasound is below that. Your so yeah, it's your recording device and your microphone are all set to human ears. So anything that's below that in a spectrogram is, in my opinion, is probably interpretive data because it's not really there.
There is the microphones and equipment that you can go.
Yes, but not, it's in the $20,000 range. There's some studies that were done with elephants. So it's, yeah, Mark, do you know anything about? Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Two-part question. Any recordings and vocalizations in the nesting area with Derek in the Olympic project? And then in the future, are you guys planning on going out and doing more vocalization recordings and video recordings and in-depth field research to update everybody?
The answer to that is yes, but as far as recording sounds there, we have not done that yet. We have really kind of had a hands-off. We took a totally different approach rather than just invade the area. We are doing a minimalist scenario. That's why Derek is mainly the only person that goes in there every once in a while. And he goes in there with a purpose to get in and get out. So since we have 5 years, we're kind of biding our time and doing it properly. But yes, we will end up recording there. Vocalizations have been heard there by people in the surrounding area. So we know that something vocalizes in there that's suspicious.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. One more round of applause for David Ellis.